Welcome to the Sun Today for the 8th of March 2022. Today we're going to talk about a new record of activity that the Sun has set for solar cycle 25. It's a spotless record. But first let's talk about what's happened in the last 24 hours. This is the summary chart I posted on Twitter this morning. You can see in panel 1 top left that the sunspot number is stable at around about 85, which is quite active. In panel 2 we can see that geospace is relatively quiet, with the KP index varying only between 1 and 3. The solar wind speed has dropped to 430 kilometers per second. In the third panel at the bottom we have the GOES X-ray flux. That is currently at B5, which is very similar to what it was yesterday, and there have been no significant flares in that last 24-hour period. In panel 4 we can see the sunspots and the corona. The bright region that was on the northeast limb yesterday has now actually moved onto the disk, and we can see a couple of large spots there. There are 3 regions that are decaying somewhat, and 2 of those are going to be going over the limb in the next couple of days anyway. We have a number of prominences around the limb which featured a lot in what I was talking about yesterday. In panel 5 it shows the new record, 86 days since the last spotless day, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. In panel 6 we can see that we've had 7 consecutive days with flares greater or equal to C1. So let's talk about this new record for solar cycle 25. 86 consecutive days since the last day without spots on the sun. That's over 3 months. The last record was set just prior to that at 85 days late last year. So that means in the last 174 days we have only 3 officially spotless days. Now I say officially here because you may recall I tweeted about this some time ago, that 2 of those so-called spotless days I was able to identify sunspots on the sun, and so they missed those. And this is one of the problems I have with counting spotless days, because it's such a hit and miss thing. A group of spots can come up and go away in a few hours, and if your observatory is not looking at the sun at that time, or is cloudy or whatever, you don't see those sunspots and count it as a spotless day. Let's see how solar cycle 25 stacks up against previous cycles as far as the years with the most spotless days. You can see here marked in bright green the 3 most recent years, 2018, 2019 and 2020. 2019 was the 4th most spotless year on record. However, that was during solar cycle 24. Remember that solar cycle 25 does not start until 2020. So, and that year is actually the 19th most spotless year on record. So therefore 2020 is not particularly outstanding as far as spotlessness is concerned. Let's see how good an indicator of the coming cycle the number of spotless days is. This is a plot from the SIDC in Belgium showing the evolution of the number of spotless days in red and the sunspot number shown in green. Note the sunspot number is inverted and not the normal way up. So a high number of spotless days should correspond to a low number of sunspots, and indeed at first glance that does in fact seem to be the case. The black dot on the far right is where solar cycle 25 stands, and if you believe that, then solar cycle 25 should be about the same size as solar cycle 24, perhaps just a little less, which is what some people have been saying. However, how well does this correlation stand up? So what I've done here is I've taken off the points from the number of spotless days and compared them to the peak of the subsequent cycle. And if you do that, you get this plot. While there does seem to be some very loose correlation between them, i.e. the fewer the number of spotless days, the higher the cycle is, you can see it's not a very good correlation. It's not a nice straight line. And the uncertainty on a given measurement is something like plus or minus 50 in terms of the size of the next maximum. And giving a size of a maximum plus or minus 50 is not particularly a convincing measurement. In fact, I did the same thing for the size of the previous maximum to the number of spotless days between that maximum and the subsequent one. Does a low solar maximum set you up for a lot of spotless days between the two cycles? And indeed, you get a very similar sort of plot. It's not quite as good as this one, but you get a very good similar plot. So either this means that one or other of these factors is important, or perhaps some combination of the two of them. But at the moment, I see no real strong cycle dependence here that we can rely on as far as predicting whether there's going to be a strong maximum or a weak maximum, and especially not seeing whether there's a grand solar minimum. As you can see in the previous plot, we had many years that were lower than solar cycle 24, 25 point, and we didn't get a grand solar minimum following them. So what can we conclude from all of this? Well, first of all, solar activity remains high. Every subsequent day with sunspots adds to the new record for solar cycle 25. The question is, will it reach 100? And from the sunspots we currently have on the sun, unless they all suddenly disappear, the answer to that is probably it will. This new string of days with sunspots on the sun may last for years as the cycle builds to maximum and goes into decay. As a forecast tool for solar cycle maximum, spotless days is a poor indicator. And it seems that the number of spotless days bears no relevance to a grand solar minimum or not. And please, if you enjoyed this video, pass it on to others. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.